All right, everybody. Hello, hello. My name is Marilyn Pearson Hendricks with WorkTech Advisory, and I'm joined here today with Jeremy Citro, and our topic is turning demos into deals. Welcome to our WorkTech scaling series, and we're just really excited about having you here today. We had been attempting to do a LinkedIn Live, and that did not launch, so we are doing our recording here today so that we can send this out to you, and you can review the material and content at your leisure. I have to say that the genesis of this topic actually was inspired by our partnership with Unleash. And we've had the good fortune of supporting their startup community and providing educational content to founders and senior leaders that are bringing new and sparkly, innovative solutions to market. And so our objectives here today, really, and for all of our scaling series sessions that we do, is to provide sage in the trenches advice for the people who are making the future of work. And in today's session, what we wanted to do is a deep dive on the beloved and much maligned necessary evil software product demonstrations. And really, we all know what great looks like, and getting there and putting those elements in place, it sometimes can seem a little bit like voodoo. And interlaced through our discussion, Jeremy and I are going to be sharing the psychology of effective demos. And that really gets into peeling back the onion in some of our lessons learned, our battle scars and road rash that we personally accumulated. But really, what we wanted to do is help you with tailoring your product demonstrations to different audiences, and then also to inspire you to think more deeply about the storytelling techniques that will hopefully make your demonstration memorable. Again, my name is Marilyn Pearson Hendricks, or my people know me as MPH, and I've dedicated my um, life to and my career to helping founders and their senior teams really unlock the revenue potential of what it is that they're bringing to market. And I do that by combining my domain expertise, my time in professional services, supporting really large enterprise, and also working to crack the code on putting the most innovative tech into the hands of the people who will value it the most. And with me today is my partner in crime and our practice area leader, Jeremy Citro. Jeremy, couple of words about what makes you do this kind of work.
Yeah, sort of thing, Marilyn, and great to be with all of you today. My career has really been dedicated to helping HR, IT, and finance leaders use human capital insights, analytics, and practical strategies to transform their organization so that they can move from their current state in terms of people strategies and people impact to their desired state. And after a long career at Heritage CEB and then Gartner, where I helped build Gartner Talent Neurons, customer success and sales engineering function, now I partner directly with WorkTech and advisory and B2B leaders in other spaces like advertising and media to help them tell their stories in a way that builds genuine trust with their ICP and drives momentum in the sales cycle. And so, really excited to partner with Marilyn today to go through some of the practices that we've found work to help your demos really be that true primary conversion tool, so that you can build that trust and win more deals.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. In our work together, the Work Tech Advisory, we typically will have a conversation with someone that says, I don't know what else to do, right? And so they're wondering what, you know, on the journey to product problem market fit, I like to call it, or product market fit more commonly. We seem to be doing all the things. We think that we're doing them right, and it's not working, and we don't know why. And so there's a trifecta of awareness, differentiation, and being recommended in deals in the revenue engine. And so this is the puzzle that we really like to figure out. And so our goal with our clients is to really reduce the trial and error that is associated with unlocking goodness for your future buyers. And for this topic today, we're gonna just like get right into it. We're gonna start with what we're calling the demo sense. And um, and when when Jeremy and I and the rest of the team are working together to unlock that potential or figure out like what's not working, oftentimes that we're going to do some forensics on your current state of your sales motions. Like, what are you currently doing, and how does it feel for the buyer? And so, what we wanted to do is share with you some of the call it low hanging fruit demo sins that we encountered, and and they're not really necessarily technical problems, and they're not even preparation problems. They're actually framing problems. And so you get, a call with you finally get a call with a prospect that you've been wanting to talk with, and what you do is you want to show them what you have, all of this, years in the making in your journey of maybe you've made a digital creation of yourself, and 45 minutes later, uh, you might have, hey, great, that looks wonderful. We'll be in touch. And then crickets. And so just to get us warmed up here on a Monday, what we wanted to do is throw five of them at you and just riff with you here in call it the diagnosis area. And it gets a lot deeper than obvious. But oftentimes what happens is you get on a feature tour, or it's and the way that I frame this is we have a lot of what your product does, how your product does what it does, but not necessarily a clear problem statement. And their problem isn't the lack of your product. And so that is, these are things that are probably more easily fixed, if you would. But it's really common, very, very first time that we have an interaction or listen to one of your sales calls or join you in one, is that we will see probably some combination of these sins. Um, the showing instead of connecting is something that gets into the psychology of the demos, and Jeremy and I plan to go deeper into that. Oftentimes that script is almost like a rinse repeat, depending upon, it doesn't really matter if it's who it is that you're speaking with. The demo ends up being pretty much the same for every audience. And again, this gets into the third point. Really, the second point is not really having a clear so what. So, and Jeremy, anything else you'd like to add into this?
Yeah, I think lifting up from these five kind of common software product demo sins is you're so excited because you know your product or solution inside out. You know the cool innovation that it brings to the table for your customers. And the trap then is it becomes too much about your story and not enough about your customer's story. Because at the end of the day, right, you win business when you can help your customer visualize during all of your sales interactions, whether that's the first sales interaction, the demo, or the proof of concept slash closing call, right? That you can take them on the journey that gets them from their current state to their desired state. So it's about the problem or challenge that they need to overcome and not about, right, the really cool innovation or offering that you and your team have built. And it is cool, but the conversation, right, is a story around what's going on in their world and where they need to get to.
Right. And just kind of go a level deeper in this conversation, Jeremy and I thought it would be fun to bring up a little dialogue that we had on our own LinkedIn post regarding this event. And so thank you, Kirsten Robinette, for putting this together for us. And so this was our invitation to join us in this discussion here today. And um, down here, we had a guest from the Redditus group come up and point out something that we thought would be really interesting to talk about. It says most demos break before they start because the rep is still guessing what matters. If the first 5 minutes don't lock into a real workflow and consequence inside the buyer's world, the rest turns into a tour they politely sit through. The shift isn't better storytelling, it's tighter pre-demo alignment. So you're not discovering the deal live while trying to advance it. And this is true in an ideal world, right? So ideally, I mean, any of the sales training classes that you go through, be it, the good old standard of Miller Hyman or just really any sales training will encourage you to have conversation, really get in, find ways to get inside of your buyer's brain first, and then just the conversation to your buyer. I mean, that's not necessarily rocket science. You can chat GPT questions, and I think it will give you the same advice, probably, right? But what happens when you've got a form on your website and it says schedule for a demo? Let's say that's connected onto your Calendly, and you're so excited. Somebody wants to see my stuff. So you get a meeting from somebody that you've never spoken to, or maybe if even if it's in a You're at a trade show or something like that, you're at an Unleash conference, and you haven't really had that pre-conversation to do the prep, right? I mean, it's what do you do then? What do you do when you have that? Is it the one shot? I have to speak with this person, and if I just talk fast enough and show them as much as I can, maybe they'll talk to me again. I mean, that's a little bit of the psychology. I mean, Jeremy, let's pick this one apart.
Yeah, and I think, we chatted a little bit about this. Absolutely right, right? You should have before any sales conversation, no matter where it is, right? And the cycle with any opportunity, right? Pre-call alignment. Um, the reality is, though, is that that demo may in part be your first sales interaction too. If, for example, you previously spoke with a manager, but not the decision maker, or maybe you first connected with a technical buyer, right? Your appointment setter or your business development representative had a few minutes with a technical buyer who then kicked it up right to their manager. And so now you're speaking with the manager on your demo. In the real world, right, you're not going to have a perfectly linear sales process every single time. So we think the right way to think about this is not mutually exclusive, but complementary. Of course, you should lock in important things, right, that you want to bring into the call, like who's going to be on the call, what they care about, what their level of decision-making authority is, et cetera. And of course, you want to have beforehand an agreed, right, if not objective or outcome, right, for the end of the call that the buyer will assess the call on, at least what the agenda is, and know, right, what workflow, right, what is the big thing that matters to them that the conversation is going to be oriented around. In reality, right, you're not going to get that 10 out of 10 times. And so you will be doing, probably in the majority of your sales interactions, some diagnosis and delivery in the moment. And that's okay, right? Because by executing on the fundamentals that we're going to provide a few highlights from, right, you can have a sales interaction that is framed so that it's focused on the buyer's journey and where they want to go, and position your solution or offering within that transformation.
Jeremy, you 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 said a word that was really important in um, your sage advice, and that's this idea of framing. And I think as I think about the word demo and some of the work that we've done, together, um, it's what is the goal of the demo and what are we doing in the demo? And I'm thinking about um, just a fabulous client that we worked with about a year and a half ago. And it was the same kind of situation. I was introduced by a couple of different person to the CEO at HR Tech, and she said, we're we don't know what else to do, right? And they wanted to increase their conversion rate. And after doing some forensics on the demo, and she was the creator of the product, the realization, kind of the light bulb went on, is what are we actually doing when we say the buyer thinks that they're getting a demo? Or what are the boundaries of what we're doing in that conversation? And really, it's qualifying. The sales training will tell you it's qualifying whether or not you're spending any additional time with that account is worth your while. So it's a conversation. And so what happened with this amazing CEO is she was getting actually almost irritated when she couldn't go through her exact flow. And it was, she was really giving them, I would call it love. She was trying to teach them all of the important things about what it was that she created and why was it she did that. But it turned into a full-on monologue. And so I think as we go in and unlock the psychology of the demo that actually leads to these demo sins, it comes down to the word that you said, which was framing, and the framing of what our expectations are for that conversation.
Yeah.
And so once we reframe what the definition of a demo is, particularly if you're a technical founder, you're the person that created the thing that it is that you were wanting to bring to market. It's almost more difficult for someone like you than even those that are, call it professional sales engineers, or solution consulting professionals. So with that, what we wanted to do was Jeremy we have some blog content and some key takeaways, all of the material on kind of our well, a high level overview of this particular topic. We do have available for you in a written format for you as well. But what we wanted to do is bring that to life and then just give you our top 12 list. And so one of I'm kind of a habitual connoisseur of YouTube, and I hate it when they make you go to the whole end of the video to get the 12 things or whatever it is, and they bring you through the sausage maker. I just want to know what they are up front. And then I'll decide if I want to stay with you through all of them. So we decided to actually give you all 12 at once. But we're going to bounce around a little bit on these topics, and again, happy to cover anything with you as a follow up if you wanted to have more of a private discussion as well. So now, Jeremy, you have as you unpack a methodology for turning demos into deals, you have a formula that has worked for you in the past that you have some very strong opinions about because you have seen the difference on before and after. Share a little bit about all right, if you have some advance notice timing wise, well,
Sure.
for the person who filled out the form, and it's not just like an on the spot meeting,
Yeah.
talk a little bit about what you do to prep.
Yeah, sure thing. And I think just the frame right before we jump into that is the most effective demos, right? For any offering, whether it's an advisory or professional services offering, software offering, right? Cloud as a service, et cetera, is showcasing your solution in a way that enables your customer, so your prospect who's taken the time to meet with you, to visualize how they're going to use it to dispose of something big that matters to them, right? And achieve a personal, team, functional, and/or organizational objective that matters, right? So that get them to a positive purchase decision. And so, as Marilyn said, right here, 12 practices that we've found throughout our career, right, help you really nail the fundamentals of highly effective demos. And so, to Marilyn's point, right, and to that comment that we highlighted just a moment ago, right, before you walk into every demo or any sales interaction, your FSI, your demo, your closing call, right? A buyer group, right? With all the technical buyers who have to give the thumbs up to the decision maker, whatever the sales interaction is, right? Make sure that you spend a little bit of time not boiling the ocean on every single thing, right? That you could digest about the organization and the team you're meeting with, but some really important things. So, who's making the decision? And are they going to be in the room on that particular call with you, right? Who has the budget authority to influence the decision? And right, who maybe has the political authority to give a thumbs up to someone with the budget authority, right, who would then in turn lobby for a purchase. On that comment as well, right, they mentioned what is the key workflow, and here we want to understand as much as we can, right, even if it's a sales development representative, right, or a BDR talking with someone to schedule the call, right. What are you working on right now? Why does that matter to you? And what's not happening that you need to have happen, right? Where is it broken? Right? And what is that costing you? And try to also understand what they've been trying to do to fix that or overcome it, and what needs to happen for them, right, with that particular process, workflow, or strategic initiative over the next 6 months so that they can meet the KPIs in their own performance plan. So, not about boiling the ocean and spending hours and hours of doing research, but a really focused 15 minutes trying to get answers to those three things: who's in the room and what their decision making authority is, what they're working on, and what's broken with it or not optimized right now, and what do they need to have happen so that they can hit their own KPIs, their personal KPIs, their team KPIs over the next 6 months. That will help you develop a hypothesis that's tailored to that prospect about how using your solution in partnership with you will help them get to that transformation that they need to have happen.
Right. It's funny, Jeremy. It's like as I think back on my personal experience and also supporting clients, there's when a buyer gets in a room for a demo, there's typically kind of almost two camps. One is they want to literally truly geek out on the product. I would say that that's the minority of the first meetings when that happens, right? If again, if the call to action on whatever promotional activity was, hey, we're going to meet and I'm going to give you a demo. What it kind of goes back to the saying, what was it? Stephen Covey, I think it was, seek first to understand, then be understood. A lot of
Yeah.
times buyers really welcome a business conversation. Like what brought you to the search that you had where you were looking for, X, Y, or Z? What happened or didn't happen in your business that caused that? And if the problem that you're encountering right now is not solved, what is the consequence? And the curiosity questions aren't wasting time. And they'll tell you if they really want to crack on and get in the product, and you can always go there. But what is missing oftentimes is the business conversation and the curiosity about what is happening in their world. And I think it's funny, in January of this year in my hometown in Minneapolis, we had a we had a panel as part of uh, an association that I'm the executive director of called Learn, Leading Edge Human Resource Network. And so we had Land O'Lakes, we had Alina, and we had also had I can't remember the third one, but it was another big name in the Twin Cities. It was a Lifetime Fitness. And what was so interesting is as we got into the topic of AI in the panel, the buyers in the room were like, we don't really care. I mean, they're experimenting with AI. They're like, the AI features in your product, we actually really don't care about. What we really care about is what are the problems that whatever technology you have can solve. And it was like this reality check that there is such a different language that is happening amongst the buyer world versus in this echo chamber that you get when you're on the vendor side and when you're on the founder side. It was so far apart. And so the bridge that we could offer is, I think, on the top 12 list here, is that as part of understanding the landscape and the business and the decision making and who is responsible for the decision and what is your timeline, those are all really reasonable questions as you get started. You could even have the product up on the screen and you're having a conversation about that. Really curiosity around the business impact and what is the consequence of not doing. That is
Yep.
just so huge.
Yeah. At the end of the
Yeah,
day, it's about people, right? And Marilyn, to
right.
your point, your questions aren't just curiosity, but they're also conveying that you care, or use your language about their world.
Mm,
That's really what the essence of, and that's really the essence of the most effective demos, right? And that then gets into, so as much as you can research those things in advance through combination of publicly available info, whatever's in your CRM, and whatever sort of pre-demo, either formal interactions in FSI or just a quick scheduling interaction that you have, bringing that then into the demo up front. And that's practice three. So, right within the first couple of minutes, it's understanding, right, what does success look like for the prospect, right? Here's what we have learned about your organization, right, through talking with XYZ beforehand or in a research that we've done. We want to make sure, right, that we understand and center this conversation on what's most important for you to get out of it. And you say that, right? Because then it's about them, not about all the cool features and like updates that we're going to be shipping soon, right, in our solution. And so using the upfront to, instead of launching into your story, right, about, here's how we were founded and here's what we've done and here's how we've arrived at that product. And you may share some of that, right, being flexible during the course of the demo or, right, your first sales interaction. But really, it's about getting that alignment, going back to that comment we shared with you, right, around what the prospect wants to accomplish by the end of the call and understanding what are some of the things that they're going to consider and evaluating whether they should go with you versus someone else or just go it alone and do what they've always done, right, to try to solve this thing.
Right. No, it's really true. And so and again, it just comes back to this idea of framing. You
Yep.
know, the definition of what the biggest problem that we have overcoming the demo hurdle for conversion is the fundamental philosophy of the presenter, if you would, of you. Maybe it could be you, but what is your philosophy and expectation of what you think you're supposed to do in that meeting
Yeah.
versus, and if we can basically unlearn that and then rewire that as um, in a different way. And I think there's a scarcity mentality, Jeremy. I mean, sometimes, I mean, particularly too, if, I mean, the people sometimes that we're working with, I mean, they've, you know, especially if they don't want to dilute when they've done self-funding, they could have mortgaged their house, they could have
Yeah.
maxed out all their credit cards. And so there's a state of scarcity. So when you get a person on the line, there's almost like a desperation element. Not to say that that's not understandable, but
Yeah.
it kind of comes into this is the only time I'm going to get to talk to you
Yes.
at perspective. And that is what directly leads to kryptonite.
Yeah, you put yourself right under that pressure, right, to show everything, to do full justice to the innovation that you've built. And of course, you want to do full justice to it, right? You're in it day in and day out, right? You've put your own financial leverage, as Marilyn said, behind it, and you've made those sacrifices. But that, right, then gets you into the trap of making it about, right, us rather than about your customer, despite your best intentions with that and the pressure that the real pressure that you're facing, right, to have each and every interaction succeed. I think this brings up an anecdote for me from my days at Heritage CEB, when CEB was simply, right, books and meetings, right, were the delivery of its product, which were just best practices and quantitative insights, right? So um, and this sales leader in CEB's HR practice shared with me that it's about persuading the prospect um, that they want to take a leap of faith with you. So, regardless of what your product is, right, whether it's simply IP in the form of insights and analysis, whether it is cloud as a service or whatever, right, your innovation is, it's still human to human connection, right? The human on the other end of the line or in the web meeting needs to perceive that you're going to help get them from A to B and you're going to go along on that journey with them because you care about that. And so I really love that anecdote from that CEB sales leader because ultimately, right, that's the thing you want to walk in with every single conversation.
Yeah. And again, it gets back into the power word of framing that
Yeah.
happens there. And what we're doing is there's a sales consulting company that I was first introduced to in the late 90s. And I would say that their thought leadership and training fundamentally changed my life. And the company's name is called Corporate Visions. And the original founder of the company, he sold it, and today it's something different than what he originally started. But um, his last name is Laughlin. But he wrote this book called Samurai Selling. And the philosophy in that book was that sales is service. It's helping somebody meet an unmet need. And in order to really s- provide that service, you almost have to set your own needs, desires, fears, all of those things aside and really put yourself in their shoes. And when you start to put your head in their shoes, it becomes a place where some of the on the top 12 list, what you're looking to do then is understand what kind of strategic questions would be important for them or useful for them, or to be able to address, this is called pre-handling, some of the big concerns before asking, right? The worry list that you know is going to be there because something is new. There's a way to, to to begin to interlace those into your formula. And so, but it all comes back to being, setting aside who you are, what your needs are, what you want to accomplish, and getting inside their brain. And that's a framing and that's a philosophy. Yeah.
Number five, you just referenced, Marilyn, is so important because going back again to that comment, right, that we showed you a little while ago from someone on LinkedIn, a group on LinkedIn, right? In an ideal world, right, you had a first sales interaction, which was 100% discovery and diagnosis. So what you're going to do, right, in part of practice three and setting that alignment is just reaffirming, right, that here's the key workflow process or strategic initiative, right, that we're going to center the call on today. Most likely, you may, right, you probably have an idea of that, but you haven't unpacked it fully, right? With with a diagnostic only first sales interaction. So you're going to want to start with, when we met with your team or when we were scheduling this call, right? We understand that, right, you need to accomplish X, or you're trying to optimize Y, or you're trying to reinvent Z. Is that right? And you mentioned a couple of things that might be getting in the way, and you're still going to do, right, upfront some diagnosis, right, in your demo, right? And that's where, to Marilyn's point, the client focused strategic questions, right, really are the key there.
Right.
Right. So, and another anecdote from CEB, they used to have an annual sort of sales and revenue conference, right, that was held for the sales team, the account management team, and all of the solutions consultants like myself. And one of the things that stuck with me from a presentation was a very simple, not simplistic, and effective framework every time. So whether you have a true first sales interaction or you're doing diagnosis right after the demo is scheduled from your web form, what are you working on? Why does that matter to you and the organization? And what's getting in the way? Your questions can always fit into one of those three.
Hmm.
And then from there, right, you can, as you're prepping for the call, right, in that 15-minute, right, sort of let's research, right, the buyer and the organization to develop our hypothesis, write down 3 to 4 specific questions, right, based on what you know, so that you can start conversationally, right, and build that connection and kind of mitigate, right, that very natural incentive and that pressure to do the show and tell, where it then becomes about you, and the demo is likely going to go down to a path where they're then going to say, okay, thanks, that's great, we'll get back to you.
Right. You know, it's what is sometimes simple is not easy.
That's right.
And I think probably one of the key takeaways here is for anyone who's maybe even personally in the situation of like, I don't know what else to do, is number one, there's a lot you can do. Number one, there's never been a situation where I come in and I'm like, I don't know either. Usually it's real obvious. And there's usually more than a lot of things that can be tuned and improved. And just it's your willingness and readiness to shed your skin that oftentimes makes the difference in doing these practices and so forth. One of the things that we didn't talk about in advance, but I was thinking about, Jeremy, as you were sharing your story, is earlier this year, I contacted a vendor that I had used probably 10 years prior when they were just a startup. And this was a company, and there's a whole category, but it's a company that manages call it the responses for RFPs. So if you are uh, if you're in a situation where it's you're a new entrant into a mature space, you may be the recipient of RFPs. Although I think it's funny, I think they kind of ebb and flow in terms of how popular RFPs are. But RFP questions and thinking about the responses is really a discipline in and of itself too, that carries over from demo to a written response. But this particular vendor, I won't name them here, but I completed a form. I literally wanted to see a demo. And I'm like, I'm a past customer. I implemented your software in this year at this firm. And I was one of your probably first 50 accounts, if not less. The sales team put so much friction in front of my call that I never was able to get a demo. I literally just wanted to see the improvements. I'm like, I'm a past user. I know what it does. I know why it's good. I want to recommend you into an account that I have that really needs what you have. And the RFP question, the responses to questions are really an opportunity to tune the language because alignment between a written response and something that you're prepared to respond to in a demo. But literally, and I gave him some feedback. I said, this has been a horrible buyer experience. On one hand, there's the vendors that are rushing into like, I want to spend 45 minutes yapping at you about my what and my how and all the great features and all the AI capabilities of my product. But the other side of it is if you put like too much of a barrier up at the very front, right? Because they were following clearly a very good process, sales process, and they didn't like that I was a consultant and was gonna, they weren't dealing directly with the company, and they were allergic to that, so they had grown up and put in place a really robust, well-oiled thing. But I was never, I was now I I have scars.
Yeah. It's
So
sort of spirit of the law versus letter of the law. So going back to sort of the fifth
mm,
practice, yeah, you might have a battery, right, of discovery questions that you would have ready to go, right, for any interaction, right, with a particular opportunity. That doesn't mean you use all of those questions, even in the first sales interaction, if you actually have a formal first sales interaction, right? Maybe you use 3, 4, or 5 of them, right, to hone in on the workflow process or initiative that is a big deal to them and they need help with, or reaffirm and get a little bit more context, right, to set up your demo. All right, to focus your demo on the objective that they want to understand how you're gonna help them with. So absolutely, right. We want to be faithful to executing good process. What we don't want to happen is have process get in the way. I can't tell you how many times in the Gartner setting, right, the account managers felt so much pressure to go through every single slide on here's the Gartner story. Of course, right, you want to establish your credibility in the market as an innovator or as an innovator and soon to be leader, right? And what differentiates you, right, in terms of um, the things that you bring to the table, right, for your clients. But getting lost in that, right, you're losing time to A, make that connection, that human connection, and B, making sure that you're going to orient the conversation, not a show and tell demo, the conversation on what matters to them. So yes, good fundamentals. No, right. Don't kill yourself to go through every single sub bullet on your sales process playbook. That's not going to create a winning demo. That's going to persuade someone to take a leap of faith with you.
Right. So it was interesting though when you are the recipient of the demo,
Yeah,
right?
for
Where
sure.
you're actually buying something. It's like, all right, well, what's this going to be like? Because I have opinions and I know what good looks like. And so, and one of the things too that is pretty common in terms of like demo sins and didn't quite make that list, but it made the advice list on the top 12. But the wrap up, I mean, oftentimes,
Yes.
we're like, all right, I want to tell them as much as I possibly can, and then we're like 2 minutes right or 1 minute before our hard stop, right? And it's not likely that they're going to go over because it's already been an hour,
Yeah.
right? How can we do a better job at the end of the meeting? And then what do we do afterwards? Let's talk
Yeah.
a little bit about that.
So first thing, and we probably should emphasize this, always at least end on time, if not a few minutes before. I guarantee you, in today's world, if you give somebody a few minutes back of their time, that will shape their perception of you personally, and all right, by association, your organization. Second, really critical. Um, Whether you're on the call as the founder, or it's your head of sales or a sales rep or even a product person, right? Get that commitment to next steps. If you don't have time to ask anything else, just simply say, based on our conversation today, all right, what we've discovered together, what questions do you have, and what needs to happen next, right? Get something specific so that you can orient your follow up around. If you've got a little bit more time, and say, what do you think makes sense as the next step? And don't accept any vague answers like, we'll get back to you, we're going to noodle on it, etc. Right? Because if you do, then momentum will definitely stall. So what is the next step? Even if it's a user group, right? To then you're really going to do a show and tell with everybody who would be the day-to-day user versus the buyer, whatever that might look like. After the conversation, send them something that will help you build momentum. That can be a playbook, that could be an ROI calculator, that could even be something as specific as, and from my time at CEB and then Gartner with Talent Neuron, even just a couple of bullets saying, right, we're going to help you use X to do Y, or we're going to help you use A to decide B. That gets referred to, right, in that closing call, or if you have informal interactions, right, where you're right asking for their business, right, something that helps them remember that A to B journey, current state, desired state, how the solution, right, is the pathway on that journey for them. So those would be the two things to make sure that you wrap up with: a specific next step and what else they need to see, and then something even as simple as 2 or 3 service plan bullets in the form of use X to do Y, right, in their language, that helps them make the case, right, to their boss, or helps them make the case in terms of right budget that they're going to put forward to partner with you.
Right. I mean, this is where, Jeremy, you're exactly right. There's some real work. The vendors that win aren't always the ones that have the better product or the better features.
Yeah,
It's the ones that help their buyers sell when you're not in the room.
yeah,
And so as we think about our follow-on materials, it's what do they need to be able to translate the capability into solving the business problems? It
yeah,
all goes back to ROI. If we can't connect it back to ROI as part of our discussion, it's that is a framing element and a belief that the world is fair and the best product wins. And that is absolutely not true. We have lots of examples of very popular products that in our we can go through those analogies, but where that it's the better go to market, it's the better buyer support that actually wins the demo. And that's a framing, it's a philosophy issue. I will say this, if I would give a pro tip on okay, so you're sitting there, you're talking to the manager. Manager's like, I'm going to bring this back to my team and I need to check their schedules. And then we'll have another conversation. That goes in the black hole.
yeah,
So this doesn't work every time because sometimes it does go back in the black hole. And you don't know if all of a sudden there's an M&A happening or a restructure or the boss left. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that have nothing to do with you that they're not in a position to proceed with what it is that we're discussing. I will tell you this on the scheduling side of things. I do two things. Um, I either pre-negotiate some time options and suggest, or I say, how about if we suggest, and then I'll do a calendar invite. We can move it around if or as we need it. And what I find is that the ability to propose an alternative time, just doing the calendar, you've talked to them. It's not like you're doing it out of the blue and you've never met him. But if you are following up and you're getting crickets, say, hey, just tell them you're going to do this. I'm going to propose a time. It probably will not work. That's okay. We can adjust it. Two things will happen, right? If they completely decline it, you don't have a deal. You never did. And what we don't want to do is spend time with accounts that will not close. So move on, right?
Yep.
Doesn't mean they'll never be there. It's just not now. You can still be friends with them. You can still have them on your follow-up sequences, but they're just a not now. If
Yeah.
you send out a calendar invite and they know so, same deal. All right. But what I find in more than half the cases is that that prospective calendar invite, you told them they're going to do it. They've said that they wanted more. That little calendar invite, and again, you can put some text in there too that would link make some of these points, Jeremy, that you've articulated.
Yeah. Right.
It will counter propose a new time. Just the
Yeah.
act of creating that calendar invite is enough friction, enough cognitive overload, but removing that one step,
Okay.
some people could be offended, but others could find it just a huge relief as a busy manager because then they can go, oh, I'm gonna counter propose. Let me look at the free and busy times of my team. Boom, let's and then pick whatever. Yeah, rearrange calendars, so you counter propose. See, hopefully won't overlap with one of your demos. But
Yeah.
that calendaring thing, when you don't have, when they do have, I'll get back to you, and you can't really force them into that in the last 2 minutes, is something that flipping works. So,
Yeah. Anything we can do, especially at the end of the conversation, to remove workload on the prospect,
yep,
cognitive or perceived, real or both, as well as any potential objections, right? Um, Around the process. So what makes sense is the next step. When should we schedule time to discuss, right? Budget and your onboarding, those sorts of things. And please do not ever send a generic thank you for your time follow up.
mm,
Always send, right, an onboarding plan like I described earlier with the 2 or 3 bullets around we're going to use X to do Y. We're going to use A to decide B, right? Along your journey from current to desired state. So that, right, they have something specific, right, that will stick with them around why they should go with you versus your competitor versus just doing what they've always done in house. Because at
right,
the end of the day, going back to what Marilyn and I said in the beginning, right? It's about your prospect and the journey that they need to go on, right? For the transformation that they're leading for their team or organization. So the most effective demos, right, will do two things. One, you'll nail, right, the sort of the necessary step, which is the buyer perceives, the prospect and their team perceives that you get their day-to-day realities. And second, right, you've got at least one compelling use case that's going to help them transform their organization from where they are to where they need to be.
and that's the key point on the storytelling. It's that before and after picture and being able to parlay that in there. And so, the storytelling, we didn't go real deep into that as an element, but what we're really doing in the demo is is maybe we're not so much demoing, but we're having a conversation. And think of the software as a prop, not you're not teaching the class. So again, this philosophy. Well, Jeremy, we have lots of opinions. We could keep going on this, but what we wanted, I think our mission has been accomplished here today in terms of hitting the high points of our objectives here. And again, we've got the battle scars and the hatchet marks from having probably made every mistake that exists in what not to do on the demo side of things. And so really it's a process, but I think that the psychology of the effect of demos is one of the key takeaways here. And framing, to use your words, is just such an important aspect of how we show up and what we do and what the expectations are. And so So it's a process, and with today's tools of being able to record your sales calls, be able to run it through and get direct feedback from LLMs, they all do this now. There's no reason why you shouldn't be having an opportunity to improve what it is that you're doing each and every call. And again, happy to partner with you and help to uncover that in a little bit more real time in a tailored environment. But it is our sincere hope and desire that this discussion here today inspired you to think of some things differently and realize that, yes, when you think you've hit a wall, what else can I do? There's typically a lot more that can be done to improve your success in the revenue side of things. So, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Any parting words, Jeremy?
Parting words.
All right. All right. Have a great rest of your day. Take care, everyone.